And we'll gently stir this together so that the avocado doesn't break up. And again, we're going to taste everything together. I love the flavor of this, but there's an observation I would love to make, and that is there is so much lime that it can seem a little one-dimensional sometimes. So adding just a pinch or two of sugar can take the edge off the harsh lime. There we go. And that should make all the difference. I think we're ready to plate this dish. Let me bring this over. I've got some tortilla chips that have been fried that I think make a great accompaniment to a ceviche like this. I've got a little glass. I think it's kind of a showy little martini glass. And I'm going to gather up this ceviche and add it to the glass. So, ceviche with chips. Make sure the cut of the fish is right. Make sure that the fish is very fresh. Make sure that you drain the liquid after you've soaked the fish. Marinate these ingredients separately. Don't marinate them along with the fish. And then serve it while it's nice and fresh, and make sure there's enough beer. Okay, now we're going to roast a whole fish, and you might wonder what this is doing here. This is fennel. This is Florence fennel, and we're going to roast a whole fish on a bed of fennel, so I thought that you might enjoy seeing it. I've got the fennel all sliced up here, and so I'm going to set this aside, and we're going to get started with a bed of vegetables that we can roast this sea bass on. I've got a hot pan, and I'm going to put some olive oil in there. And I'm not really interested in browning these vegetables too much. What I'm more interested in is making sure that they get tender. Think of this like a vegetable stew. So I'm going to cook those onions until they begin to become translucent. A little bit of salt will help draw some of the moisture out. And let's talk fish for a second. What I have here is a striped bass, and we're going to roast it whole. And there's a good reason to roast it whole. The reason is simply this, that when you cook meat on the bone, it absorbs the flavor from those bones, and it is much more flavorful and tends to be moister. Just the same way I could make a stock from those fish bones, that same flavor can make its way into the meat. So leaving it on the bone makes good sense from a flavor standpoint. Also, if you're lazy, it's nice to be able to take this fish whole and pop it into the oven. But we have a little bit of work to do with it. First and foremost, the fish needs to be scaled. And I would suggest you let the fishmonger do that for you. Just tell him you would like the fish scaled and he'll do it for you. But if you have the fish at home already and it has the scales on it, what you should do is draw a knife or even the edge of a kitchen spoon backwards against the way that the scales lay on the fish. So drag your knife from the tail towards the head, and little by little the scales will just pop off. It can be a little messy sometimes, so often I will take a plastic garbage bag and put the fish inside and then do this. I have a few scales still left on here up around the collar. Do the same on the other side. Scrape all the scales off. Here's a few right here, and you can see them popping off as I scrape. Now, how do you know when they're all off? Well, if you take your hand and you run it along the fish, if their scales still intact, you'll feel them. They sort of catch the edge of your finger, but they're all off. I'm going to sweep away these last few and look in on my onions. All right, just starting to become translucent, so I'm going to introduce all of this fennel. Fennel has a wonderful, delicate anise flavor. And we'll cook that until it starts to soften a little bit. Back to our fish. Take a look at this fish. You can see at its thickest, it's about 2.5 inches thick. I usually figure that when I'm roasting a fish in an oven about 450 degrees, that it will cook for about 8 minutes per inch of thickness. So a fish like this might cook for 15 to 20 minutes. It's good to evaluate the fish before it goes into the oven. This right here is the thickest part of the fish. And so this is really what we have to worry about. I'm going to get this fish seasoned with salt and pepper. I'm going to season it on both sides with salt. And I'm even going to season the cavity a little bit, likewise with pepper. And then I'm going to mop up some of the salt. And on the interior, I'm going to stuff it with branches of thyme, just like this, a couple of slices of lemon, and a bay leaf or two. And that will flavor the fish from the inside out as it cooks. Okay, I'm going to move ahead. This fennel is just beginning to soften. I'm going to add garlic to the pan. And I want to take care not to burn the garlic, but as you can see, this mixture is not really browning. I've got the heat nice and low. The vegetables are just getting tender. And I'm also going to add some tomato. It's just diced tomato. Just so that this can begin to stew a little bit, I'm going to add some white wine. And we'll add a bay leaf and a branch or two of thyme. And this is just about ready to go. This is the base that our fish is going to cook on. And this can even finish cooking while the fish is in the oven. So we don't have to worry too much about that. What I do want to concern myself with is the flavor of this. It should have a good flavor. It should be properly seasoned. I've added a little salt. It could use a little bit more. I'm going to add some pepper at this point. And we're ready to move forward. I've got a pan that is big enough to accommodate our fish. I'm going to put a little bit of oil in the bottom so that nothing sticks. And we'll take this bed of vegetables. If you were interested in making a full meal of this, if you wanted a starch as well, you could even add some white beans to this vegetable stew. I'm going to leave it just the way it is right here. I'm going to take this fish and I'm going to move it right onto its bed. That bed of vegetables will keep it moist around the fish and temper the heat of the oven, and yet we'll see a little bit of browning on the top. And to facilitate that browning, I'm going to anoint this fish with a little bit of good olive oil. So at this point, the fish is ready to go into the oven. We're going to leave it in there for 15 minutes and check it, and then somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes it should be done. All right. I just pulled this out of the oven. It's nice and hot. This fish has been in there about 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more, and you can evaluate its doneness a number of different ways. You can sort of poke at it, but where it is the thickest is right here behind the collar. Right here behind where the gill opening is. That is where the meat is the thickest. And if you take a knife and just cut in there, what you can expect is that the meat will be opaque all the way through, and it should separate easily from the bone, which it does very nicely. So I'm going to take this fish off of its bed of vegetables. And I'm going to be a little bit careful with it because it's tender now. And move it over to the cutting board. The vegetables look beautiful. And we're going to talk about taking the bones out of this fish. Take a look at what we've got here. The tail is starting to get just a little bit crispy. What you may have noticed is I cut the fins all off. The fins along the back, here, and on the bottom. And I cut them off because in a hot oven like this, they tend to burn. You can see how crispy the tail has even gotten. So trim all those away. Now, every place there was a fin, there will remain a little bit of a remnant of where the fin was attached. And you can go in and pull out the bones that would have passed from the fin into the fish. So I've got some right here, and then along the back as well, you'll find a few bones that are the continuation of the fin inside the fish. And I'll gather up those bones and take them away. Now, I'm going to take the head off this fish. I'm going to cut through the skin right here at the tail. Maybe even a knife would be a good tool. And then I'm going to come in right down the center line and try and separate the fish from the carcass. And it should pull away. If it fights you at all, then it means that the fish is probably undercooked. And you can put it back and give it another 20 minutes or so. So let me push this back, push it back. I need to cut through that skin right there, push this back. And the top fillet is off. Here's the bones on the inside, and you can see I'll lift them right up and they should pull off. Okay? So those bones are gone. Any errant bones from the fins can be gathered up. There's one or two more right there. I'll gather those up. If you see how moist the fish is, it's beautiful. It smells of the thyme and the lemon on the inside here. And then what I want to do is I want to take this top fillet and move it back to where it was. Move it right back on top. Basically rebuild this fish. I'll take some of these vegetables out of the body. Those can go away. Some people like the head, others not so much. There's a little piece of meat right here under the eye called the cheek, but on a fish this small, it's not very big. I can sort of dig it out for you if you're interested in seeing it, but